fired 5 shots into that wolf from less than 20 feet away. Every single bullet hit it. I watched them hit. But the wolf just stood there, staring at me with those cold, intelligent eyes. This happened in 1994, shortly after my family moved to our new ranch in Utah. What I encountered that night made me realize we'd made a terrible mistake. The bulletproof wolf. We'd been living on the ranch for maybe 2 months when it happened. My wife and I had bought the property to raise cattle, 512 acres of beautiful land in northeastern Utah, near the Uintah Basin. It seemed perfect, peaceful, isolated. But from the moment we moved in, things felt off. The previous owners had installed heavy-duty locks on almost every door and window, not just on the house, on the sheds, the barns, even some of the cabinets in the kitchen. When we asked about it, we couldn't get a straight answer. In fact, we could barely track down the previous owners at all. Still, we figured they were just paranoid. The property had been sitting empty for years. Maybe they were worried about vandals. Looking back, we should have listened to our gut. It was late evening, just after sunset. I was walking the perimeter of the property, checking the fence line, when I heard a noise near the cattle pen. A low growl, something moving in the shadows. I turned and saw it standing about 30 yards away. A wolf. But this wasn't a normal wolf. This thing was massive, easily 3 times the size of any wolf I'd ever seen. It stood almost waist-high, with thick gray fur and a muscular build. Its eyes caught the last rays of sunlight and glowed a dull amber. As I watched, it casually walked up to the pen where we kept the calves, leaned its head over the fence, and grabbed one of them by the nose. The calf let out a terrified bellow. That snapped me out of my shock. I ran back to the house, grabbed my rifle, and came back out. The wolf was still there, calmly trying to drag the calf through the fence. I raised the rifle and fired. The shot echoed across the valley. The bullet hit the wolf square in the side. I saw the impact, but the wolf didn't yelp, didn't fall. It just stopped, turned its head toward me, and stared. I fired again. This time I aimed for its chest. Direct hit. Nothing. The wolf let go of the calf and started walking toward me. Not running, not aggressive, just walking, calm, like it was curious about what I'd do next. I fired a 3rd time, then a 4th, then a 5th. Every shot hit. I could see the fur ripple where the bullet struck, but there was no blood, no wounds. The wolf didn't even flinch. By the time I'd emptied half the magazine, the wolf stopped about 10 feet away from me. We stood there, staring at each other. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then, slowly, the wolf turned and walked away. Not in a hurry, not limping, just walked off toward the tree line like nothing had happened. I followed it, keeping my distance, my rifle still raised. The wolf's tracks were clear in the dirt, deep impressions from a heavy animal. But as I followed them toward the forest, something impossible happened. The tracks just stopped. Not at a rock, not at a stream. They stopped mid-stride, in the middle of an open field, like the wolf had simply vanished into thin air. I stood there for a long time, staring at where the tracks ended, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. When I got back to the house, my wife was standing on the porch, pale and shaking. "Did you see it?" she asked. "The wolf?" She shook her head. There was something else. By the barn. It looked like a person, but it was moving wrong, like it was on all fours. And it had glowing eyes. That was the first night. Over the next few months, we saw things we couldn't explain, lights in the sky, strange figures moving through the fields at night. Our cattle started dying, not from predators, but from what looked like surgical mutilations. Clean cuts, no blood. Like someone had performed an operation on them and left them to die. We heard voices, disembodied voices calling our names from the darkness. My wife would hear me calling for her from outside, but I'd be standing right next to her in the kitchen. And we kept seeing that wolf, or things that looked like wolves, but they'd stand on two legs, or they'd watch us from impossible places, on top of buildings, in trees, perched on fence posts. 18 months after we moved in, we sold the ranch and left. People ask me what I think it was. Was it a wolf, a bear, a dog? I don't know what it was, but I know what it wasn't. It wasn't a normal animal. The locals have a name for things like that. They call them skinwalkers, shapeshifters, witches that can take the form of animals. They're part of Navajo legend, but we weren't on Navajo land. We were next to Ute territory. And according to the stories, there's bad blood between the Ute and the Navajo. Some say the Navajo cursed that land, unleashed skinwalkers to guard it. I don't know if that's true, but I know what I saw. And I know that bullets don't work on it. If you ever see a wolf that's too big, too calm, too intelligent, don't shoot it. Just leave. Because if it's a skinwalker, you can't kill it, and it knows where you live. We were driving home on a back road outside Santa Fe when I saw something hunched over, crossing the street ahead of us. At first, I thought it was a person on all fours. Then a massive white owl flew up beside our window and screeched at us. This happened in 2015, and I'll never forget the way my uncle's girlfriend reacted. She knew exactly what we'd just seen. It called my name. It was around 2 a.m. My uncle, his girlfriend, and I had just left a casino about an hour south of Santa Fe. We were taking the back roads home, a route we'd driven 100 times. Quiet, empty, just desert and scattered houses. My uncle was driving. His girlfriend was asleep in the back seat. I was riding shotgun, half zoned out, watching the road. That's when I saw it. Maybe 50 yards ahead, something moved across the road. It came from the left side, from the desert, and crossed toward the houses on the right. At first, I thought it was a person, but the way it moved was wrong. It was hunched over, its arms extended down to the ground, like it was crawling, but upright. Its limbs were too long, too thin. "Did you see that?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My uncle didn't answer. He was staring straight ahead, gripping the wheel. The thing crossed the road in maybe 3 seconds and disappeared into the shadows between two houses. My heart was pounding. I didn't know what I'd just seen, but every instinct in my body was screaming that it wasn't human. "What the hell was that?" I finally managed to say. My uncle's face was pale. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but I saw it too." We drove in silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then, out of nowhere, this massive bird flew up beside my window. An owl, but not a normal owl. This thing was huge. Its wingspan had to be at least 5 or 6 feet, and its feathers were snow white, glowing almost unnaturally in the moonlight. It flew right next to the car, keeping pace with us, and then it turned its head and looked directly at me through the window, and it screeched. Not a normal owl sound. This was loud, sharp, almost like a human scream mixed with a bird call. It echoed inside the car even though the windows were up. Then it flew off into the night. I looked at my uncle. He was white as a sheet, knuckles tight on the steering wheel. I turned around to say something to his girlfriend, thinking she'd slept through the whole thing. But she was sitting straight up in the back seat, wide awake, staring at me. "Did you see what I saw?" I asked her. She nodded slowly. "What did you see first?" she asked. "Something crossing the road. It looked like a person, but it was moving on all fours." Her face went even more serious, and then the owl. "Yeah, how did you—" "It's a skinwalker," she said, cutting me off. I'd heard the term before, but I didn't really know what it meant. My uncle's girlfriend is Native American. She grew up on the reservation, and she'd mentioned skinwalkers a few times, but always in a way that made it clear she didn't want to talk about them. Now she looked genuinely scared. "Skinwalkers can change their shape," she explained. "They transform into animals, coyotes, wolves, owls, and they use those forms to get close to people. The fact that it crossed in front of us and then appeared as an owl, that's not a coincidence." "Why an owl?" I asked. "Owls are bad omens in Navajo culture. Seeing one, especially a white one, means death or danger is near. Skinwalkers know that. They use it to scare people." "So that thing we saw was the same thing that flew next to your window," she finished. The rest of the drive home, none of us said a word. My uncle drove faster than usual, and we didn't stop until we were parked in his driveway with all the doors locked. Later, she told us more. She said skinwalkers are witches, people who've done terrible things to gain the power to shapeshift. They're not animals. They're people who've become something else. And they can mimic voices. They can call your name in your mother's voice, your friend's voice, anyone you know. She said the fact that we saw it on that particular road wasn't random. That area is known for skinwalker sightings. People see them crossing roads, crouched in ditches, standing on two legs in the desert, watching cars pass. And once a skinwalker knows you've seen it, it remembers you. I don't drive that road anymore. And when my uncle's girlfriend broke up with him a year later and moved back to the reservation, she told me one last thing. "If you ever hear your name being called at night and you don't see who's calling you, don't answer. And don't go looking for them, because it's not a person, and it doesn't want to help you." My grandfather only told this story once, sitting around a campfire in his backyard in Arizona. His voice was quiet, serious, and I could tell, even as a kid, that he wasn't making it up. He'd seen something in the desert when he was young, something that still haunted him decades later. This is his story. The Thing in the Desert. It was a clear desert night. Stars filled the purple sky, and the moon hung low over the mountains. Grandfather's voice was raspy and gravelly, a lifetime of cigars and whiskey. But when he started talking, everyone went quiet. "Way back when I was a boy," he began. "About your age, I lived outside an Apache reservation with your great-grandfather. He'd come back from the war and bought a 100-acre ranch between a mountainside and a dry desert. The land was rough, good for growing thorn brush and not much else." He paused, staring into the fire. "One night my mother got sick, real sick. So Pa and I took a trip into town to get medicine. It was about 50 miles away, straight through the desert, over a washed-out creek, past some old abandoned farmsteads." Grandfather took a deep breath. "We were maybe halfway there when the truck started acting up. The engine sputtered, the headlights dimmed, and then it just died. Right in the middle of nowhere. No lights, no houses, just flat desert in every direction. Pa got out to check under the hood. I stayed in the cab, and that's when I started to smell it. Rotten eggs. Sulfur. But also something else, carrion. Like a dead, bloated cow left out in the sun until it burst. The stench filled the cab and I gagged. Then my skin started tingling. The back of my neck felt itchy, My face got hot, and the wind, it just stopped. Everything went still and heavy. I called for my paw, but no words came out, just a dry squeak. My heart started pounding. I felt a fear I'd never felt before, not until Vietnam, not until I saw men dying around me. That's when I saw it. Grandfather leaned forward. A shadow, something big. It moved across the road, through both beams of the headlights, faster than anything I'd ever seen. I locked the door, reached over to lock Pa's door, and that's when I saw it clearly. It was standing about 30 feet away, right at the edge of the road. It had the body of a man, muscular, lean, covered in gray mottled skin, but its legs, they weren't human legs. They were bent backward like a deer's, hooves instead of feet, and its head. Grandfather paused, his eyes distant. It had the head of a coyote. Long snout, pointed ears. But the proportions were wrong. Too big, too human. And it was grinning at me. I froze. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The air felt electric, like right before lightning strikes. I smelled ozone and brimstone. It took a step toward the truck, then another. Its hooves clicked on the pavement, and then it spoke. Not in words I could understand, but I knew it was speaking. The sound came from its chest, deep and guttural, like a growl mixed with a human voice. I wanted to scream for my paw, but I still couldn't make a sound. Then suddenly, the truck roared back to life. The headlights blazed on, and the thing, it just turned and ran. Not like an animal, not on all fours. It ran upright, on those backward legs, faster than any man could run. It disappeared into the darkness in seconds. Pa climbed back in the cab, pale and shaking. "Drive," he said. Just one word. So I did. We didn't talk about it that night, or the next day, or ever, really. But years later, when I was older, Pa finally told me what he'd seen. He said when he was under the hood, something grabbed his ankle. He looked down and saw a hand, gray, with long claws, reaching out from under the truck. He kicked it away and ran. Grandfather looked around the fire at all of us. The old Apache and Navajo, they have stories about these things. They call them skinwalkers, shape changers, old warriors brought back as skinless men walking on deer legs with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote. They say they're 7 feet tall, even hunched over. That they can gut a man with their claws and run through bullets like they're nothing. They say skinwalkers can change their voice to match someone you know, your mother, your friend, anyone. And they use it to lure you out into the dark. He shook his head. I don't know what that thing was, but I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. It wasn't an animal. It was something else, something that shouldn't exist. And it smiled at me. Grandfather went quiet after that. The fire crackled. Nobody spoke. Finally, I asked, "Did you ever see it again?" "No, but sometimes, late at night, when I'm out here alone, I smell it. That sulfur smell, that rotting stench. And I know it's still out there, watching." That was the only time my grandfather ever told that story. He passed away a few years later, and I never got to ask him more about it. But I've done my own research since then, and I've found hundreds of stories just like his. People seeing things in the desert, creatures that walk on 2 legs with animal heads, things that smile at you from the darkness. They call them skinwalkers, and according to the legends, if you see one, it means you're on their land, and they don't forget.